107 motorcycles parked along Sycamore Lane in Decatur, Illinois on a Saturday morning in November was not something that Street had ever seen. Not the retired schoolteacher at number 14 who came to her window and stood there with her hand over her mouth. Not the family across the way who brought their children to the porch and the father lifted the youngest one up so she could see over the railing. Not the man 3 doors down who had lived on Sycamore Lane for 40 years and who came outside in his bathrobe and stood on his walkway looking at the chrome and the leather and the exhaust rising in the cold morning air, like something between a vision and a fact. 107 motorcycles. Idling, waiting, every kickstand was down. Every engine was running, and every saddlebag, every cargo rack, every strapped bundle and packed crate on every one of those bikes held something the same. Food, boxes and bags and coolers and wrapped packages. More food than the residents of Sycamore Lane had ever seen arrive at a single address at once. More food than a person could carry in a week of trips. All of it headed for the front porch of a small white house at number 22, where a 74-year-old woman named Iris Polly had been feeding her granddaughter on whatever was left in the pantry for 6 days running. It started with 7 words. 7 words spoken by a 9-year-old girl to a stranger in a parking lot on a Thursday afternoon. Said not as a complaint and not as a performance, but in the flat, exhausted way that children state facts when the facts have become too heavy to hold quietly anymore. We have nothing left to eat. The parking lot of the Aldi on El Dorado Street was not a place most people lingered in November. The wind off the Illinois flatlands came down between the buildings in gusts that tasted like rust and coming snow, and the sky had the flat gray ceiling of a Midwest November that has decided it is not moving anywhere and would like you to make peace with that. Shopping carts drifted in the lot with the specific purposefulness of things that have stopped being guided. The storefronts along the strip had their lights on in the particular way that lights are on in the early afternoon in November. Not inviting, just present, doing what they can against the gray. Nate Colgrove had parked his bike on the far end of the lot at 2:15, heading north from Champaign toward a chapter event in Bloomington, stopping because he had been on the road since morning and the cold had gotten into his hands and he needed coffee and 20 minutes off the seat. He was 49 years old, Illinois River chapter. A man with a scar along his jaw from a wreck in 2004 that he did not mention and did not hide. He was the sort of man who took up the correct amount of space and not a square inch more. Quiet at the center, observant at the edges. The kind of person who noticed things without making the noticing about himself. He had been inside the Aldi for 7 minutes when he came back out with a cup of coffee from the machine near the door and found the girl standing at the edge of the lot. She was 9 years old, small for it, wearing a coat that was the right size for a smaller version of herself, not this year's coat, last year's or the year before, zipped to the chin and still not quite long enough at the wrists. She had a canvas grocery bag hanging from both hands in front of her, empty. And she was looking at the entrance of the store the way children look at a problem they are trying to solve by staring at it. Her shoes were wet. Nate stopped. He looked at her for a moment, not long enough to be intrusive, long enough to understand what he was seeing. A child alone in a parking lot in the cold, in a coat too small, with an empty bag and a look on her face that was too old for her years. He walked toward her. "You waiting for someone?" he asked. She looked at him, at the cut, at the size of him. Her expression did not change toward fear. It changed toward the particular evaluation of a child who has learned to read people quickly and has filed Nate Colgrove under a category that was not dangerous. "My grandma," she said. She went to get money from the machine. But it said no. He looked toward the ATM at the side of the building. An older woman was standing in front of it, not moving, her hand flat against the wall beside the machine, the way a person's hand goes to a wall when their legs have decided to take a moment. He looked back at the girl. "What's your name?" he said. "Addie," she said. "How long have you been out here, Addie?" She thought about it. "Since the bus," she said. "We took the bus from home. Grandma said there was enough in the account for groceries. But the machine said no." She looked at the empty bag. She said it without drama, without tears, with the flat, declarative exhaustion of someone who had already absorbed the disappointment and was now simply standing inside it. "We have nothing left to eat," she said. "Before we hear what Nate Colgrove did next, drop your city in the comments. Wherever you're reading this from, your city, your state, anywhere in the world. Hit subscribe so you never miss what comes next. To everyone watching who has ever opened a pantry and found less than you needed, this story is for you. Stay with us. Because what happened next is exactly what you needed to hear today. Her name was Iris Ann Pauley. She was 74 years old, and she had lived in Decatur, Illinois for 46 of those years, in the same house on Sycamore Lane that she and her husband Leonard had moved into in 1978, when Leonard was still working at the Caterpillar plant, and the mortgage had seemed enormous and manageable at the same time. The way mortgages do when you are young enough to believe the future is the direction everything goes. Leonard had been gone for 11 years. The house was paid off. The neighborhood had changed around her in the way that neighborhoods change, slowly, then all at once. And then you look up and it is different. And some of the differences are fine, and some of them are the kind you do not say out loud, because saying them makes you seem like you are complaining about the wrong things. She had raised 2 children in that house. Her daughter was in Phoenix. Her son was in the Navy, stationed somewhere she needed a map to find. They called. She did not tell them things that would worry them, because worrying them was not something she was willing to do from a distance, and because she was the kind of woman who had always solved her own problems first and asked for help when the solving was done, which meant she almost never asked for help. She had been the kind of woman who kept a full pantry. This was not incidental. It was a form of security she had practiced for 46 years, a hedge against the unpredictable, a thing Leonard had teased her about, and she had not stopped even after he was gone. Extra flour. Extra rice. The canned goods stacked in a specific order in the back cabinet. She knew what was in her pantry the way a pilot knows the instruments, not from looking, but from knowing. When the pantry had begun to empty this fall, she had known. Her Social Security check was late. Not the first time. Not a crisis in isolation. But it had been 11 days and counting, and there had been a gap. And into that gap had come the heating oil bill, and the co-pay for her blood pressure medication, and the dentist appointment for Addie that she had put off twice already. Addie had been with her since August, when Iris's daughter in Phoenix had called to say that the situation with Addie's father had become a situation that required Addie to be somewhere stable for a while, and Iris had said, "Send her, without hesitation, because of course, because where else, because family is not a calculation." She had not told her daughter about the pantry. She had not told anyone what she still had: a box of oatmeal, nearly finished, some canned beans, half a jar of peanut butter. Addie did not complain. Addie ate what was on the table and said thank you and cleared her plate the way Iris had taught her. And Iris watched her granddaughter eat and felt the specific shame of a woman who had always been the one who made sure there was enough, failing at the things she had built her household on. She had small dignities she held on to. She still set the table properly, the placemat, the napkin folded, the glass filled before Addie sat down. She still made the oatmeal on the stove, not the microwave. Because Leonard had said stovetop oatmeal tasted like breakfast and microwave oatmeal tasted like a decision you regretted. She still put on a house dress every morning before Addie came downstairs. Because a grandmother in a house dress was a grandmother in charge of her kitchen. And she intended to be in charge of her kitchen for as long as she was in it. She had taken Addie to the Aldi because she thought there was enough in the account. She had miscalculated, or the timing was different than she thought, or the deposit had not cleared. And when the ATM said no, she had put her hand against the wall because her legs had briefly suggested they might not hold. And she was standing there trying to decide what came next when she heard footsteps behind her. Nate Colgrove was standing beside Iris Polly before she had time to fully turn around. He had Addie with him, one hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder, and his face was doing the thing that faces do when a person has made a decision and is proceeding from it rather than toward it. He said, "Ma'am, I'm going to get your groceries. Will you let me do that?" Iris looked at him. The coat, the cut, the patches, the scar along his jaw. She looked at her granddaughter, who had found this man in a parking lot and apparently decided he was safe, which Iris trusted, because Addie was 9, and 9-year-olds read people with an accuracy that most adults have trained themselves out of. She said, "I can't let you do that." He said, "You can. It's just groceries." She opened her mouth. He said, "The little one told me it's been a few days. I'm not going to walk past that." He paused. "My mother would not have let me walk past that." Iris looked at him for a long moment. Her hand was still on the wall. She took it off the wall. "All right," she said. They went through the store together, Iris with her list and Nate with the cart. And he pushed the cart, and she put in what she needed, and he did not interfere with the list, and he did not add things without asking, because he understood that her list was her dignity, and he was not going to replace her judgment with his generosity. When she hesitated at the meat counter, he waited. When she reached for the store brand, and then put it back, and reached for it again, he said nothing. At the register, he paid. She did not argue a second time. There are moments when arguing costs more than accepting, and she was a woman who understood the economy of moments. In the parking lot, while Addie carried the bag and Nate carried the rest, Iris said, "What do I call you?" "Nate," he said. "Nate," she said. She said it the way Loretta had said a name, the way you say a name when you mean to keep it. She gave him her address for the receipt, in case the charge was wrong and he needed to reach her to settle it. He wrote it in his phone. He drove them home. Addie sat in the truck he kept a block away for weather like this, and held the grocery bag in her lap, and asked him how fast the motorcycle went, and he told her. And she said that was very fast, and he said yes it was. He carried the groceries to the door at 22 Sycamore Lane. He shook Iris's hand. He told Addie it was nice to meet her. He went back to his truck. He sat in it for 4 minutes. Then, he called his road captain. He talked for 8 minutes. When he was done, the road captain said, "What time tomorrow?" They came at 8 o'clock Saturday morning. The sound arrived first, the way it always does, rising from the direction of Eldorado Street, deep and multiple and growing, the overlapping engine note of many motorcycles moving together in the cold. The retired schoolteacher at number 14 heard it and came to her window. The family across the way heard it and brought the children to the porch. The man in the bathrobe 3 doors down heard it and came outside without thinking. 107 motorcycles turned onto Sycamore Lane from both ends simultaneously, filling the street from curb to curb in a formation that moved with the quiet precision of something organized by people who had done this kind of thing before, who understood that logistics in service of a human purpose required the same care as any other logistics, more care, because the purpose was watching. They parked. The engines went quiet one by one, and the silence that followed was the silence of a neighborhood that had collectively stopped breathing. Every saddlebag opened. Every cargo rack was unstrapped. Coolers came down. Boxes came down, paper bags, and wrapped packages, and a crate of produce, and 2 flats of canned goods, and a box of children's cereal with a cartoon bear on the front, and a pound of coffee, and a bag of flour, and a bag of sugar, and a bag of rice, and 4 gallons of milk, and 12 dozen eggs, and enough meat for a month wrapped in white butcher paper. Each package marked in marker with what was inside, so there would be no confusion in the freezer. The road captain, a man named Boyd Sutter, had been coordinating since Thursday night. He had called chapter contacts across 3 counties. He had a spreadsheet on his phone that tracked what was coming, and from whom. He had assigned the load in and the arrangement so that the front porch of 22 Sycamore Lane would be organized when it was done. Not a dumping ground, a pantry. A real one. The kind Iris Polly had spent 46 years maintaining. Iris heard them from inside. She was in the kitchen, already in her house dress, and Addie was at the table eating the last of the oatmeal, stovetop, properly made, when the sound came and Addie's head came up, and she said, "Grandma." Iris went to the window. She stood there for a long time. Addie came and stood beside her. "Is that for us?" Addie said. Iris could not answer immediately. She put her hand on Addie's shoulder. There was a knock at the door. Iris went to it and opened it, and Nate Colgrove was standing on her porch with a box in his hands, and Boyd Sutter was behind him with another, and behind Boyd the porch was already being arranged with the care of people who understood that how you leave a thing is as important as what you leave. "Morning," Nate said. Iris looked past him at the street, at the chrome and the leather, and the 107 people moving with purpose up and down her front walk in the November cold, organized and quiet and deliberately efficient. Filling her porch and then coming back for more. Her neighbor from number 14 had come out onto her own porch and was standing with her coffee and her hand over her mouth. The father across the way had put the youngest child down and was watching with his arms crossed and his jaw set in the way that a man's jaw sets when he is determined not to show what is happening to him. The man in the bathrobe had gone back inside. He came back out with his own coffee. He raised it. Not toward Nate. Toward the street. Toward all of them. It took 47 minutes to unload and arrange everything. Boyd's spreadsheet accounted for all of it. When it was done, the porch at 22 Sycamore Lane held enough food for 3 months. The freezer inside held enough for 2 more. There was a card from the Illinois River chapter with a phone number on it, and a note in Boyd Sutter's handwriting that said, "If it runs low before the check comes, call this number. We mean that." Iris stood in her kitchen after they had gone and looked at the shelves. Full, every shelf. The canned goods stacked in order the way she stacked them. The flour in its place. The rice in its place. The box of cereal with the cartoon bear on the counter because Addie had asked if she could keep that one out. She put her hand flat on the kitchen counter. She had been in this kitchen for 46 years. She knew every inch of it. She knew where the light fell in the morning and where the draft came from in winter and which drawer stuck when it rained. She had fed children and grandchildren and neighbors and friends from this kitchen, had sent food across the street when someone was sick, had made the casseroles for the funerals and the celebration cakes for the graduations, and the ordinary weeknight dinners that are the real architecture of a family's life. She had not expected to be the one receiving the casserole. She stood in her kitchen for a long time. Then she got the good dishes down, not the everyday ones, the ones she kept in the top cabinet for occasions. and she set the table for two, properly, with the placemats and the napkins folded and the glasses filled. And she called Addie in, and they had breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs and toast and juice and the last of the good jam that had been in the refrigerator doors since September. And Addie ate with the particular concentrated happiness of a child eating a meal that has no anxiety in it. And Iris watched her and felt something that had been tight in her chest for 6 weeks loosen its grip. Slowly, the way cold things warm, not all at once, but steadily, irreversibly. Nate Colgrove was back on Route 51 by 10 o'clock, heading north toward Bloomington. A day later than he had planned, and carrying nothing he had not carried when he left Champaign except the address on Sycamore Lane and the look on a 9-year-old girl's face when she asked if the food was for them. He thought about his mother's kitchen in Peoria, the way she had kept her pantry, the specific comfort of knowing, as a child, that the shelves were full, not because fullness was guaranteed, but because someone had made it their business to ensure it. He had not thought about that kitchen in years. He thought about it now. He rode through the flat November country, the fields stripped and brown on both sides of the road, the sky still gray and low, and the cold was in his jacket and in his hands, but it was the kind of cold that you ride through rather than out of, the kind that is simply part of the road. And he rode through it the way he rode through most things, steadily, without fighting it, toward wherever he was going next. Behind him, on Sycamore Lane, Addie Polly was at the kitchen table doing her homework with a glass of milk beside her. And Iris was at the counter making soup for lunch from a recipe she had not made in 2 years because she had not had all the ingredients at once. And the house smelled like something it had not smelled like in a long time. Like enough. A 9-year-old girl said 7 words in a parking lot in November, and a man who was supposed to be somewhere else was close enough to hear them. That is the whole machinery of it. He heard. He stayed. He called. And the next morning a street that had been quiet and separate and minding its own November business woke up to 107 motorcycles and understood, for the first time in a long time, that it was still a neighborhood, that the word still meant something, that the word could still be made true by the people willing to make it. The man in the bathrobe raised his coffee. That is the image this story leaves. Not the chrome, not the formation, not the boxes being carried up the walk. The man in the bathrobe raising his coffee toward a street full of strangers who drove from 3 counties away to fill one woman's pantry. That is what a community looks like when it remembers what it is. If this story reached you, if you believe that hearing someone and answering is still the most important thing a person can do, share it with someone who needs to remember that there are still people who stop. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been helped by a stranger when you needed it most? Or been the one who stopped to help? Tell me what happened. Drop your city. I read every single one.